All right, welcome everybody to the Viza Property Management Podcast. Today we have a little bit of a different kind of guest here today, David Chen from the RKB group.
Got it.
Beautiful. Well, David, welcome. Happy to have someone on here who's in a little bit different space than strictly real estate property management industry. So why don't you just first start by telling us a little bit about what RKB is, how you got started, how you got into the business, just a little bit background about who you are in the company.
So RKB Group is an energy services company. We're a group of engineers, project managers. We focus on doing building, basically decarbonization and energy services for commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, schools, universities, hospitals, etc. Business was started about 3 years ago, and I have kind of two market reasons for starting it and two kind of personal reasons. The market reason is basically that there's a clear need out there for a good engineering firm and a good project management company to help with all this building decarbonization. And for any of the viewers, building decarbonization basically explains making a building more energy efficient and therefore reducing its carbon emissions or carbon footprint. So just for purposes of this conversation, that's the buzzword these days is decarbonization. So, buildings are just looking for good engineers and project managers. We can get into the details about how, all these projects flow, but, finding a good engineer and a good project manager who can help with all these complex processes is difficult. So there's big market need there, and RKB was founded to help fill that need.
Beautiful.
Second item is probably just the overflow of information out there for all these building owners, just kind of underpins the need for those engineers, right? And a good engineer to help them kind of navigate all the different regulations, technologies, all these different projects that they're trying to do. From a personal standpoint, I had gotten a lot of good experience with different firms and working with different partners, et cetera. And I was able to kind of cherry pick all the, best things I've seen from other companies that will allow us to run a good company such as RKB Group. And then the other personal thing is, I just kind of took it as a challenge to start a business that, I really, really wanted something where people enjoyed their work at the company and enjoyed coming to work every day, doing what they do.
Okay, and that's exactly what you're doing right now in your business. Is that what you were doing previously when you were working for another company?
Yeah, my background's mechanical engineering, so I've had a number of different engineering jobs, be it design or energy services like we're doing now, kind of all over the spectrum from an engineering standpoint.
And I know obviously there's a lot of civil, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers who probably got into this space by default, but are there a lot of companies like yours that focus exclusively in this space?
Yeah, the space is heating up. There are new regulations coming through, energy prices are rising quickly, so although energy has always been 20, 30, 40% of a building spend, all those other factors are just starting to put it on building owners and property managers' radars.
Right.
So the company, more companies are coming online. The space is getting more busy. With new companies trying to help all these building owners out with navigating all these regulations.
Right. And it's incredibly important because, condominium buildings, across, the nation, I know, especially from New Jersey, but probably across the nation too, there's so many more regulations between, the things that they have to do as part of the structural studies, and in addition to that, just the increase in overall inflation, a lot of that, which directly relates to property insurance and utilities, especially. So, I think all condominium buildings are really being compressed, and with an additional regulation out there having to do with benchmarking, it's only going to become more costly for a lot of these buildings to operate. So, I think the space is incredibly important for those condominium buildings because they have to find a way to control costs and control the HOA fees, because the higher the HOA fees become, the less marketable the units become and less valuable they become, right? So it all ties into each other.
For sure. We have a lot of empathy for the buildings for which we work. I'm on the board of my building as well, and every year seeing the HOA fees go up for different reasons is obviously a challenge. So we hold a lot of pride in the work we do to help just make building owners and property managers' lives easier.
Right, absolutely. Okay, and I have a few specific prepared questions here. Usually we do this a little bit more organically, but it's a little bit of a little bit more technical conversation today.
Sure.
So, second question I had on here: New York City regulations are already in effect. Can you just tell us a little bit about what those are?
Sure. New York City, basically, in our space, we work amongst a lot of what they call local laws, which are local regulations in New York City, which require buildings to undertake different efforts.
Yeah.
The main thing that's been around for many years, I think over a decade at this point, is benchmarking. So energy and water benchmarking, where each year they have to submit basically full consumption of energy and water to New York City.
Yeah.
And what that provides is a building, basically baselines their consumption and allows, visibility for both the owner and the city to track how these buildings are performing.
Right.
So they can see amongst, compared to say like a median building for that type and size, they can see how they're operating, whether or not their energy per square foot is much higher or much lower. And that obviously drives, their capital project planning and things of that nature. So everything kind of starts with benchmarking. And then from there, over the years in New York City, these different other energy-related local laws have come online that build on that and may require updated lighting. And then, of course, the most famous one is Local Law 97, which basically puts an energy cap or a carbon cap on different buildings. And we'll see how everything pans out, but eventually it'll start to penalize these buildings and actually fine them. And as of now, those fines are pretty real. It's that, it can be thousands of dollars, or in the case of a large building, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month.
Okay. And who's actually instituting, overseeing that? Is it the city of New York, like the Department of Community Environmental?
Department of Buildings.
Department of Buildings,
which I think kind of flows through with the mayor's office. So they kind of set the guidelines and standards.
And all buildings are subject, or only certain specifications of properties are subject to?
Yep, great question. Generally, it's buildings above 25,000 square feet, although I think there are changes to those laws that are actually reducing that criterion to 10,000 square feet.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So it mainly affects, larger buildings, although 25,000 square feet anymore isn't that large. That's only a, typical multifamily building.
Yeah.
So there's a cutoff. There are a lot of different criteria. Just like any regulation, there's a lot to cut through as far as all the guidelines and criteria that you have to understand and understand if your building falls under them.
Yeah, it makes you wonder why, there's a cutoff to begin with. I mean, if we're trying to institute, these measures across the board, why, it's the smaller properties being cut out of that requirement, and I think it also makes those smaller properties a lot more valuable because now they don't have to worry about adhering to those regulations. So, that jumps out to me because there's just there's a ton of smaller properties. I don't know what that adds up to as compared with the stuff that does meet the threshold.
Sure.
But I imagine that, over time, it'll just keep getting lesser and lesser until it probably becomes easier to benchmark.
I think so. Once you get below 25,000 square feet, maybe there's not a 24,000 square foot single family home, but eventually you're going to get down to single family residential level buildings. And it's going to be a whole different challenge to be tracking all those thousands of buildings, say in New York City, obviously in New Jersey. And so I think it's a good start while the government and these regulations figure out how to navigate all this stuff and how to actually process these local laws for them to stay at some level that's manageable.
Yeah. I feel like eventually over time, because they don't want, single families or like retail people to have to get involved, and it would be very hard to get them to really do anything like this. I would see the government hiring someone like your firm and you getting consulting contract with them and working directly with those individuals to do whatever it is that they need to do. That's just somewhere I could potentially see it going. But that's what's going on in New York City right now. What about New Jersey? I understand the benchmarking process is beginning or has already begun?
Yeah, so last year or 2 years ago at this point, New Jersey enacted a new law for benchmarking.
Yeah.
It'll probably follow the same kind of script as what's happening in New York City.
Yeah.
So again, benchmarking is submitting your annual energy and water data each year. And basically it's going to baseline each building, so that they can see how they're performing. And obviously, once you baseline something, you can measure from there and see how you can improve. We'll see, the way that things go with New Jersey and the different, similar energy or sustainability related laws that they pass. But I imagine at some point they're going to start to put some type of cap on it, start to target the buildings that are consuming excess energy or wasting energy.
Okay. And New Jersey property owners who this would likely, who would be subject to this, regulation that we think is incoming, what should they be doing to prepare, if anything?
Yeah, so as far as benchmarking, I think it's really just either having a really good inside team, like an inside group of engineers if they're a larger organization, or finding an outside group that's a good vendor partner that understands these laws who can help navigate them.
Got it.
And really emphasizing the second scenario, I think it is worth, bringing up because I see a lot of building owners trying to do this stuff themselves. And, then they come to find out that years down the road, there have been these, in the case of NYC, DOB violations piling up. In the case of New Jersey, that's expected to start soon with violations and penalties.
Right.
So you can do it yourself if you, have somebody in your office that's very knowledgeable. Otherwise, a really good engineer is probably going to protect you much better and ensure that you meet the needs of these different laws.
All right, cool. I mean, next question I had on my list, what are some of the biggest challenges owners and property managers face with laws like 97 and other, compliance requirements that you've come across?
Biggest challenges, I'd say, is just finding a good vendor partner. So we get calls all the time from building owners that have heard about, this regulation in Jersey, these different incentives perhaps that are available for their buildings, which are significant advantages that these buildings can leverage.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out how to navigate these things, right? So they're looking for a good group who's knowledgeable. And again, each of these major subjects have so many ins and outs that it's tough for them to understand, from all the different resources on the web, what they can trust and what's real. So that's the main challenge, is really finding a good vendor partner that can help them navigate. In the case of building owners, they have all these different things every day that they're trying to accomplish, right? Especially leasing, occupancy, keeping everybody happy in the building, getting a letter in the mail from DOB or some government entity saying you're in violation of something is only an extra headache for them.
Right.
So that's number one. The second thing is probably just staying ahead of the curve. So again, they have a lot going on day to day. And so the challenge of just staying ahead of the curve with these things is significant. So again, a good vendor partner is going to help you, but otherwise, if somebody has the time and resources, if they want to read up on it and just understand what's coming down the pike, I think that's that really helps accomplish what they need.
Yeah. I think it's, selfishly, I think it's good as being in a property management business, because just as more regulations are put into place, across the landscape, like, you need an expert who is more aware of some of these things you have going on. And that's just what I've seen, on the rental management side of things, there's not as much regulation, especially when you're below like a certain number of units and you're not subject to DCA, oversight and inspections. In that space, I haven't seen a huge need because people can easily handle it themselves. There's not a lot of moving parts. But with the homeowner associations, there's quite a bit going on between the recurring things that have to be done. And even above a certain number of stories, you're subject to facade inspections that have to be filed with the municipalities, and factor in this. A lot of people who may have, even smaller boards, who may have been willing to self-manage in the past, they might say, that's the final straw. This is getting a little too technical. We're not comfortable anymore. We have to bring it out to an outside company.
Right. Yeah, and I understand, I know from my experience with you guys that you guys are a very diligent company. How often are you coming across, different buildings or maybe new buildings that you're starting to take under your management where you're noticing kind of blind spots or things that haven't been properly addressed by them?
I want to say a majority of the buildings that we take over, they haven't had the reserve study done within the last 5 years, if they've ever even done one at all. Yeah. A lot of them are much smaller associations who don't want to, invest the money needed to do that. I mean, they've never been penalized in the past. I try to explain to them, like, yes, and you haven't been penalized in the past, but it could very well happen. The DCA can come in and enforce this at any point in time. Yeah. And it's good for you to have it anyway. You should really have this in place to know what we should be funding our escrow to. And, everybody wants to keep their dues as low as possible. And I say, yes, but at the end of the day, someone wants to buy one of your units, they're going to see that you have no reserve. And anytime you have to do anything, you have to put out a special assessment. So, that's not exactly helping you. It's like, yes, we see the little small HOA fees, but they're still going to see the poor HOA financials. The structural, that's only been done for the first time, required for the first time as of January 2026. A lot of buildings are still on extension, but a lot of people haven't contracted an engineer at all and haven't made any progress. And a lot of buildings don't even know whether or not they're subject to it, because not all buildings have to do it, and some don't have to do it right now, but they have to do it in the future. And it all has to do based on the engineer looking at it, saying the age of the building, the construction type, and the stories. Right. So that's just another thing that a lot of people never look at.
Yep, can't see the forest through the trees. I mean, that's usually our recommendation to any of our clients is, everybody wants to manage their money well and only spend money where it really makes sense and where they're going to get a good return. But you also have to have the vision for kind of the full spectrum of what they need to accomplish out there. So obviously you want to cut costs, but you also want to put budgets where necessary so it doesn't end up costing you more money in the future.
Yeah, 100%. And there's even some basic things, like any building which is 3 units or more has to be registered with the DCA, and if it's not, you're subject to major fines. And then if you don't pay those fines, they're recurring fines. And then, a lot of these associations I inherit when they're in, really bad shape because of all those fines which have racked up. And then there may be an outgoing property manager who we're having a tough time collecting the funds from. So now they're feeling like they don't even want to spend money on these things because they don't have the money that they thought they had. So I mean, every scenario can be quite unique.
Yeah. Endless amount of challenges out there.
But I have another one here for you. So
Sure.
what are some common misunderstandings owners have about compliance and decarbonization efforts?
I think most of it is just understanding the laws. Again, all the details, all the ins and outs, all the things that can bite you if you're not paying attention. But most of all, probably the fine structure. So, a lot of people don't understand maybe how severe some of the fines can be or the cadence at which they're, administered or they take effect. So we've seen cases where, and I don't know whether or not it's buildings not getting their mail, maybe from DOB or DCA. But they'll come to us and say, hey, we have these number of years in fines. How can we fight these fines? How can we get rid of them? And for a lot of the regulations that have been in place for a while, there's not much you can do, right? They're not going to be so nice to you when it's something that they feel that you should have been on top of and taken care of. So there's not too much you can do in that case, which is, it's always a tough situation. We try to help as best we can, but there's only so much that we can do to fight those fines. So I would say people really understanding the ins and outs of how severe some of the fines can be, which again, just kind of reinforces why it's really important to stay ahead of the curve.
But what is the fine structure generally based on square footage?
It could be. It could be based on square footage. In some case, some of these regulations could be some number of cents per square foot per month. Some of them are 50 cents per square foot per month, which can add up to very significant fines. Some are nominal, say $1,500 or $3,000 a year. Still something that, I wouldn't want to have to pay. I could rather pay for the service and especially get the benefits that come with actually complying with these laws, right? I would recommend not only looking at, hey, this is something I have to do, other if not, I get penalized, but what are the other benefits, all the different benefits that come with complying with these laws? Maybe it's something like there's a regulation that says you have to upgrade all your building lighting to LED. I mean, in this day and age, buildings should be mostly or all LED because there's clear energy savings. But complying with that law means you're going to see, energy savings, operational maintenance savings, all these different other benefits as well.
And when did Local Law 97 go into place?
That would be 2 years ago at this point. It's 2026 already. But 2024 is when it started. I think it was Bill 1253 until it was enacted into Law 97 around 2020. And then it was set to take effect in 2024. So last year was the first reporting period. DOB had subsequently provided a bunch of extensions. So finally everybody should have gotten everything submitted late last year. And so we'll see how everything pans out as far as how they dole out penalties and things like that.
Okay. And so is nearly all of your business in New York City, since that's where most of the benchmarking?
A good portion of it, but a lot is in Jersey, especially as benchmarking is coming on. We get a lot of calls for benchmarking because now any building, most buildings above 25,000 square feet have to submit. So we're starting to help get people organized and in place to get that benchmarking submitted and actually submit all those records.
And being this is still like kind of very new. I mean, it only came out about 2 years ago. Is there anything, do you think the Department of Buildings did a good job in rolling it out, educating owners and property managers about what they're supposed to do? And a lot of people are just now only starting to get their act together because of the fines which are being instituted. Do you think it was rolled out correctly, given it's obviously a massive endeavor in and of itself?
It is, and you have to appreciate that. We stay pretty impartial to what's going on in the government and these regulations. Our number one priority and what we enjoy doing every day is working with these building owners and just making their lives easier, because I personally can really empathize with just all these challenges that are constantly thrown at them. So we just do a really good job of tracking them, how they're developing. In the case of Local Law 97, which is a big endeavor, every week, basically, they're rolling out publications of revisions to the law. So we just try to track all that, distill it, provide that information back to the building owners, and just kind of take it day by day. Really focus on the deadlines. We try to be really diligent with letting the building owners know where these deadlines are and working backwards with giving them plenty of time. Right. Not just saying you have to submit a week before this, but saying, hey, 2 months before, how are you guys doing with this information? Give them updates along the way with all the milestones, et cetera. So, nobody knows unless you're in the mayor's office exactly how all this stuff is going to continue to pan out. So we just try to stay on top of what's out there, understand, the strings that we can pull to get any exceptions made or extensions provided, things like that. And the same goes for Jersey, even though it's a little bit further behind New York City. But, my sense is that New Jersey is going to be close behind New York City, especially because New York City is kind of the guinea pig for all these laws. So once everything gets ironed out there, it's going to be much easier for somebody to just adopt
Replicate.
those same regulations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. And we have another one on here. How can New Jersey buildings get ahead of future regulations by learning from what's already happened in New York City? Any successes, mistakes, or, penalties which have been incurred on that side of the river?
Yep. I would say, it's a perfect segue from what we were just saying is just stay ahead of what's, maybe check in or stay ahead or talk to a vendor partner about what's happening in surrounding areas, areas that you would anticipate being similar to what's happening, to what will happen in Jersey.
Right.
I think it's a pretty, consistent playbook, whether or not it's in New York City, Berto in Boston, in California, in DC. It's kind of the same playbook. So you can kind of anticipate what's going to happen here. Again, finding the right vendor partner, engineering expert who is able to, help translate these laws is going to help you as well. And then, as far as the energy related laws go, the overall objective is to make buildings more efficient and especially, I think, reduce energy waste. So continuing to go through your capital plans, put together a good energy, action plan to upgrade your buildings, do all your LED lighting, all your low-hanging fruit, your steam traps, pipe insulation, all those standard capital upgrades. Again, on top of the energy savings and cost savings you're going to be ahead of those regulations.
Right. Okay. And it's a big value of what you deliver to your clients, just the vendors that you're able to offer to get whatever the work is, whatever recommendations that you have for the building done?
Sure.
Yeah.
We work in a number of capacities as engineers, as project managers, as owners, reps. And that's the overall goal, right? Is to develop a rapport and really establish trust with the building where we get to a point. And I think this is what we want, what the building owners want. They want to be able to say, hey, this whole area of energy, engineering, these regulations, we want you to be the group that we can trust to say, hey, go take care of this and make sure I don't, have any issues. Just like you and I, say hiring an accountant or a lawyer, right? We don't want to learn that realm. Right. We don't need to get into the details because we want to focus on our day-to-day lives and our work. We want to be able to say, accountant, just do what you do best. Let me know, decisions you need me to make, and otherwise just protect us and paint us in the best light you can with all those different needs. So, yeah.
Is there anything from any of the recommendations that you sometimes roll out? I know, low-hanging fruit, you're always going to want to do that first and take care of that. Easiest, maybe cheapest, depending on the extent of the work. But is there anything which would require real specialized knowledge or vendor on some of the recommendations that you might come up with?
Sure.
In buildings?
Even the simplest projects require good expertise. Lighting project, a lot of building owners are very familiar with lighting projects because everybody has done LED lighting at this point. Lighting, consequentially, has been so much more complex than people think because you're in all the different spaces. Lighting is obviously, seen by all the occupants, and it affects the day-to-day operations in a space, fatigue, attention span, all that kind of stuff. So something like that seems so simple to do it the right way requires good project manager, somebody who can, do a good survey of the space, put together good bid documents, find the right contractor, choose the right materials, right? Non-installed poor materials are going to fail in a year and end up costing them more money. So I would say that pipe insulation, all these simple building measures, seemingly simple, compared to something like a full HVAC replacement or something, more complex with a bunch of different engineering disciplines. Even though simple projects really require a good project manager, right? People want to make sure that they're hiring the right people and that the end product is as intended, right? Again, lighting is a great example where a vendor can come in and say, this looks great. We're going to leverage these incentives and you're only going to pay, 10% of the total cost because we're going to capture all that money from the government. They install everything and then you walk to the space and it's not anything that you wanted, right? Color temperatures are off, brightnesses, the controls have the lights operating in the wrong way. Right. So even the simplest projects can really either fail or succeed with the right project managers and engineers.
Wow. Okay. Understood. That plays well into this. And this is the first question I'm going to get from any board or landlord. I think, when I start, talking about some of these topics, what are some ways the buildings can really cut operating costs through these energy upgrades and what incentives might be available?
Yeah, incentives is a good one to bring up. I would say just working your way through a standard capital project process. And when I say standard, we're working in everything energy. So we would typically help not with, standard windows and I don't know, we will help with windows, but, the facade of a building, we don't really touch. Structural, we don't really touch. Roofs, we're much more energy and HVAC and mechanical focused. So working your way through a standard capital upgrade program for the mechanical side and energy related, I think will help a lot. And for really any project that saves energy, you can capture some type of incentive.
Yeah. Okay.
And those can be significant. Those can reduce the cost of your projects by 30 or 50%.
Wow.
In the case of Jersey, we're seeing these incentives go up significantly. I think traditionally they used to be 16 cents per kilowatt hour saved. It was 32 cents on different years. And these programs change year to year based on what's happening in the market. So, which emphasizes the other important aspect of having somebody that's kind of tracking these programs to make sure that the upgrades that you're making, you're taking advantage of wherever these incentives are.
Right.
But recently in Jersey, they've gone up significantly. We were just working on a project for a data center where the incentive was supposed to be, I think, around $750,000. And because of the way we were able to navigate the program, our contacts there, how just knowing the ins and outs of how these programs operate and the timelines under which they operate, we were able to get that $750K raised to something like $4.5 million. Wow. So that's obviously an extreme example with a big data center facility, but even for a multifamily building that's installing heat pumps, a similar pattern can happen there.
Right. And an incentive, that's just a grant, a cash payment grant from a governmental entity?
Well, what's interesting is that incentives it comes from a fund that's paid into by account holders.
Okay.
So most of the non-public entities, anyone with private multifamily building, they're actually paying on their utility bill a small fraction into these funds. So what we always tell people is, especially, take advantage of these programs because it's going to reduce your capital cost, but also take advantage of that because that's your money that you're paying into that fund. So you're getting your own money back.
Wow.
So don't forget to leverage that stuff, especially to help reduce your capital cost for projects, which in a lot of cases ends up being the barrier to not completing that work.
Right.
Right.
Wow. Okay. And your company will handle the application and the whole process behind obtaining that incentive?
We do. We handle the whole process, which, in some cases it looks simple from the outside, but as you get into it, there are a lot of just little snags that you can hit, a lot of opportunities for projects to get disqualified for different reasons. So, the best way for us to handle is to handle the full process so we can, advise whether or not it's the owner and, things that we need from them or the different engineers, contractors, et cetera.
Right.
But we'll handle everything from the data collection to the applications, doing the engineering calculations for more complex projects, and actually negotiating with the utility to make sure that they don't kind of cut your savings down too much.
Got it.
As the savings is upon which the incentives are based.
Okay.
So we'll handle the full process. Oftentimes the utilities have to come out and inspect, do a pre-inspection and post-inspection to visit the site and see what's out there. They obviously want to verify that what you're claiming you're doing, what you're replacing, whether or not it's a furnace, a heat pump, windows, et cetera. They're going to want to make sure that the existing conditions are as you describe them.
Right.
And then after everything's done, quick visual observation of the work being completed is typical.
Okay. And before they release any incentives, are they going to want to see a certain amount of benchmarking to prove whatever projections that you gave to them are in fact reality, or can they give it right away based upon completion of the work being done?
Yeah, there's kind of a range of how stringent these programs are. But some of the simpler ones, which we tend to favor because the complex ones, again, just have so many little snags that you can hit, so many pitfalls. But the simpler ones, more straightforward ones, they will, even though they're simple, still require some level of engineering calculations to show what the benefits of those projects are going to be in the way of energy savings.
Got it.
So typically it requires a decently, detailed engineering calculation to show how the existing equipment is operating and the energy that they're consuming per year, and then the new case. Yeah. And so we'll do a nice calculation to detail all of that. Obviously, when it comes to somebody reviewing engineering calculations, they're going to want to see the premise of what you're doing, all the existing conditions, any assumptions that you're making, any of the equipment specifications, right? So
what percentage of the projects that you do would you say qualify for incentives? Nearly all of them?
I'd say 95%.
Wow. Okay.
About 95%, right? Maybe there's one or two, outliers that don't qualify for whatever reason. And there are a number of different reasons for that, or for reasons why, say, projects don't qualify. And a lot of times we get involved early so we can help, inform the different decisions that are being made to, say, pick a heat pump within the efficiency ranges that will keep it within qualification.
Yes.
So most of the projects qualify. There are some cases where if it's something small enough, it's not really worth everybody's time.
Right.
It does take, it's a laborious process. It takes a decent amount of time from our engineers to process everything the right way, especially to maximize the incentives for the building owners. But, if it's an incentive for $5,000 and you need to pay an engineer, half of that to process everything, and then you have to wait, 3 months and you need that capital. Sometimes it's easier to just pass.
Yeah, because I'd imagine it's besides the engineering side of things, it's a heavy administrative lift, I can imagine, with the amount of paperwork.
It is. And you have to make sure to check all the boxes, right? If you miss a step, sometimes it can disqualify you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really important.
And I understand a law like Local 97 does not yet exist in New Jersey, but you're saying that right now incentives can be obtained for these kind of work being done in Jersey buildings.
Okay. Sure.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It seems like, especially in 2026, the New Jersey incentives are even stronger than New York, which is the first time I've seen that. So I would recommend to anybody to definitely consider incentives. Yeah. Because it can significantly reduce the cost of that project, but also enable you to undertake all the other projects that you may have thought would be 2027, 2028. Yeah. Right. Now you can really get moving on some of the things that you're trying to accomplish in the building.
Absolutely.
So you can afford it.
Okay. I mean, well, we got a building in Jersey City I think would be really good for you to take a look at. So hopefully, we walk you or your team through there and get a good case study and, educate myself on the process.
Yeah, always happy to meet you guys out there, walk through the buildings, and point you guys in the right direction, even if that means not going with us,
Cool. Okay. So another one I had on here, what it's really like, I know we spoke about this a little bit already, what it's really like to plan and execute capital and energy projects from start to finish.
Okay. Yeah. I would say what's most important is obviously that you have plenty of time for the project. Right. Starting behind the 8 ball or behind the curve on a project is only going to set you up for failure. So as far as, it kind of varies a little bit on the complexity of the project, but make sure you have enough time, right? You want to find the right team, whether or not it's engineers, contractors, vendors, manufacturers, et cetera. So really setting yourself up for success with giving yourself the right amount of time is important. I think one of the challenges out there also is there's conflicting information out there. So again, making sure that you have a good engineer that could point you in the right direction if maybe you're looking at some different design options, making sure that you consider everything when you first set out. That'll help a lot. And as far as the different vendors out there, I've seen that there are a lot of different approaches. Only few vendors for different types of projects, I think, would really be qualified. So like, say you're replacing a full HVAC system, or you're electrifying, meaning you're changing a system from, say, natural gas or oil fire to an electric system. Complex project like that, you really want to make sure you have a qualified engineer that knows what they're doing there.
Right. Okay. Obviously, I'm assuming buildings which are subject to fines or a current violation, you're able to probably get extension on some of those so long as they can show that they hired someone like you. Here's a project plan in place. We're getting it done as soon as we possibly can. Please don't fine us anymore. We're doing our best. Right?
It's a great question. That's one of the areas that I appreciate how these programs are being run, because they do make exceptions. A lot of times it's kind of regarded as like a good faith for exception, which is great, because a lot of these buildings, for whatever reason, maybe they learned it a lot late, or they had other challenges, or they had capital squeezes, right? And they weren't able to get started on this stuff. If they come to us and we can put together a good case, we can usually submit that to the authority, and we can have either an extension made or some type of concession. Got it.
Okay. And I'm assuming the extent of the projects can really range. And like some of the projects, obviously you talked about replacing systems. You're going to have to get construction drawings, submit permits, the whole 9 yards, whereas some of them don't require any of that. It can be done much quicker, pretty much as soon as the vendor's bought out and the owner says green lights the job. Yeah.
Similar to your question about just the project process. I mean, you're going to start with kind of some conceptual engineering, understand what you're trying to accomplish, and have some type of preliminary, budgets and financials to look at in order to make, further decisions. Once a board or building owner or property management company starts to make decisions and say, okay, let's go with option A, or let's narrow down from A through D to just options B and C, right? Let's develop those concepts further. From there, you would go into kind of preliminary engineering stage or schematic design, and start to develop that design a little bit further, firm up the financials in order to really start to reserve capital for it before going into a detailed engineering phase.
Right. Okay. That's, in the reserve study, I haven't seen, at least in Jersey yet, anything relating to energy efficiency measures. I would imagine that's being done in reserve studies in NYC, which just further increases the amount that people have to put into their escrow on a monthly basis from these buildings, right? All right, so that's something to think about.
Yeah, that's been a challenge. Some of the regulations that require upgrades in the buildings kind of come out of left field for some of these building owners, and they don't have the capital or budget in place. They find a way to make it work. There are a lot of different tools and levers that you can pull, right? There are a lot of different financing programs. One to highlight is in Jersey, there's a utility program that offers 0% for 60 months for any energy-related project, which is a no-brainer.
Wow,
right?
State of New Jersey.
Money, you're making money.
Yeah.
In Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah. So there are a lot of levers that you can pull. Again, you want somebody who's knowledgeable in all these different programs, which is even a challenge for us to keep track of because there's just a lot out there. But we really try to narrow it down and distill it to the ones that, apply to the different buildings. Yeah. So again, pulling all those levers and knowing all the tools that are at hand are going to allow you to get this stuff done if you don't have the capital in place or you didn't plan to have the capital in place.
Right. Okay. And so that's just another layer of complexity. Anytime that you have a bank loan in place and then you have to do inspections on the work that was done, dealing with the finance contact and all of that. But what about new construction buildings? Like, how are they being built? Are they basically not subject to any of this because they're being built based on current building codes and requirements?
Yeah, I think we don't operate in new construction too much, but I think that's mostly where all this is covered. The energy codes, building codes, mechanical codes, et cetera, are pretty strict and stringent. So all the new buildings, they're built to the extent of these codes is such that, obviously hopefully they're not being built to have to be upgraded or retrofitted 2 years down the road. So a lot of new construction, that stuff is covered.
Right.
In the case of New Jersey and New York, there's old infrastructure, old buildings. So there's a lot more to do with old existing buildings as far as retrofits and upgrades.
And are you making any buildings, was it LEED certified? Or
we don't do too much in the area of LEED. It's not really our specialization.
Yeah.
Not for any particular reason. We just we don't have a lot of building owners that have approached us for that. I think for building owners, I think the most important thing is saving operating costs.
Yes.
So some of those other project opportunities, I think, accomplish that goal quicker.
Got it.
And more effectively than, say, the LEED certifications. Not to say that they don't have their place.
All right, beautiful. And what are some trends coming down the pipeline that will impact the buildings? Any new regulations, electrification pushes, and anything that me as a property manager should really be preparing for in New Jersey?
Yeah, we try to really just straddle the neutral line when it comes to that stuff. As old as time, there have been all these different new ideas, new things being pushed, new initiatives. And we try, we try to advise the building owners. We try to educate them at least on what those are, but then also tell them, hey, maybe give it a few years to see how that pans out and whether or not, say, that regulation or proposed bill kind of sticks before completely transforming your building and throwing millions of dollars into it.
Yeah.
So we just, again, we try to just make sensible recommendations for just things that they can do day to day, year to year, to keep their buildings healthy before going overboard with too many in-depth projects.
Okay. And when you're being, retained for buildings, is that often by the property owners directly or by property managers?
Either or.
Okay.
Both. Yeah, it's a mixture of both.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. And I'd imagine you have probably did a couple of projects with one property manager and then he becomes knowledgeable of the process and the situation, feels comfortable with your company, and then he's able to kind of really team up with you and roll it out to some other people.
Yeah, it's a team effort.
Yeah.
We're here to help.
All right.
At the end of the day, we're just working on buildings. We're just doing some engineering work. But what really matters to us is when we're able to help kind of, cut through all this confusion about all these different projects, initiatives, regulations, et cetera. So whether or not we're working for a property manager who's trying to do the right thing for their building and really run a good building, or if it's a building owner that wants to have a good building for its occupants, tenants, lessees, we're here to help any of those parties.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just really fantastic. I just wish I knew more about it. I'm definitely, making strides to educate myself more on it. But the fact that there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of ways to, reduce the overall cost of this. Number one, if the building is more efficient and doesn't have as much operating costs on the utility side, obviously the building's more valuable. So what's the valuation capture just from doing that alone?
Sure.
And the recapture from some of the incentives, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of things out there where you're going to get, reimbursed for a good portion of the payments directly from,
It's huge.
governmental entity. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity. And anytime we don't see somebody leveraging the available programs to them, it's, or we feel sorry for them because they, had so much potential with some of the funding that they could have gotten back.
Right.
So,
Okay. Is it difficult logistically to complete some of the major upgrades around existing occupants, especially on the residential side for overnight dwellings?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's definitely a concerted effort. You have to make sure that everybody is kind of bought into the project. Again, it kind of comes down to the timeline. The more complex the project, the more time you want to give it.
Yeah.
It sounds obvious, but in practice, it doesn't always happen. So an HVAC project that could affect all the different tenants and dwellings, something that's not obviously a gut renovation where you wouldn't have occupants in place. If it's something kind of in between, you definitely want to make sure that everybody's aware of the project, everyone's bought into it, understands what the impacts are going to be to the spaces.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily have to be an HVAC project. It could be anything, steam trap upgrades or radiator valves, anything obviously that's going to take place in occupant spaces. There's going to need to be good planning.
Yes.
And that's something that the engineer is going to help with. Oftentimes when we're doing those types of projects in a building, we're providing maybe some verbiage for a property manager to use and send around to everybody, kind of summarizing and informing everybody about what's going to happen so that they can plan in advance, right? Nobody wants to be caught off guard and nobody really wants anybody in their space, so we try to help with, giving them some verbiage so they can make everybody aware and there are no surprises. And then we also try to kind of on the project management side, make sure that the contractor is very clear on, hey, here's maybe your time window, your days that you're in these areas. Here are your exact directives. You're going to this radiator. You're doing one valve here. You're doing one valve here. So we don't have any inefficiencies with somebody going into someone else's space and wasting time or stressing anyone out.
Gotcha. And are you ever contracted by like commercial tenants who are doing build outs, like big retailers, things like that, right? The tenant directly rather than the building?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Some of the commercial tenants for whom we work, they have some different sustainability initiatives and things like that. So we get some interest from them, which I always like working with them because they're very proactive in this type of work. So they're always interested to hear what the options are, how they can make their space better for their occupants, employees, et cetera. But yeah, we'll often work for the tenants and find ways to optimize their space.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that, the different technologies for energy efficiency have been around now for decades, but there are still so many instances and for potential for making these upgrades. So there's always something that can be found, whether or not it's an operational or maintenance improvement or if it's a capital project improvement.
Right.
So there's always something that can be done. It's just a matter of somebody being proactive,
right,
and kind of having the perspective for undertaking that.
I'd imagine franchises must be all over this because they're looking, all day long at corporate. What can we do to maximize margins? And whenever they make, roll something out, that's something they roll out everywhere, right? Not just on the new locations, but on the next CapEx project, anytime, the next time their existing restaurants or whatever are going to be doing those repairs. So that's probably, a great opportunity working directly with people like that, I would imagine.
Yeah, it could be a franchise. It could be, multifamily or commercial building portfolio, right, with a group of buildings. Our goal always is to obviously do a good job and earn the trust of our customers so that we can, continue the momentum of that success across all the buildings, right? So whatever the project is, if we do project A in a certain building, hopefully that becomes a great case study and, provides, is a good kind of financial picture and financial case so that we can roll that same project out across all the buildings.
Right.
We definitely want to make this stuff repeatable. It's almost like you're investing in that initial project and now you're really seeing the benefits and the ROI from rolling it out across all the other buildings.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really great point you make.
And is the sentiment eventually to go away from gas completely and try to be 100% electric on all the buildings for energy usage?
Yeah, there's a big push for electrification. Like I said earlier, we just try to stay neutral on all this stuff. Nobody really has a crystal ball unless you're the ones actually doing the regulations, right? Nobody really knows what's going to happen. So there's a lot of talk about natural gas eventually going away. There are different pushes for reducing on-site fossil fuel consumption. So, we try to just keep our ears to the ground and understand what's happening and then inform the different building owners so they understand the full picture. But we certainly don't push anything too prematurely until the time is right.
Got it. Okay. I would say just operationally, it's much easier for us as property managers when it's all electric because number one, we don't have to worry about gas leaks, right? That's huge. That's a big liability. I think that there's some savings to be had on the property insurance policies when there's no gas at the start.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I mean, when you have your electric baseboards, if that's the heating system, I mean, life is much easier if you have one baseboard go out, because even a one-bedroom apartment is probably going to have 3 of them, you know? So even while that's being handled, you have the other 2 supplying heat to the unit, and it's obviously pressing, but it's not an emergency, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other buildings, you know, the whole place is out, you know, and even while you're trying to get to it, you know, sometimes it's a single family and there's not even any other apartments around it that are supplying heat, you know, incidentally, you know.
Yep. Yeah, it's a really good point. It kind of, you know, raises the idea that one of the challenges we always see out there for building owners is that there's, you know, kind of a fragmentation of all the different stakeholders, right? And that's always been the case, right? A building operator is going to have very different priorities than a property manager, different kind of views than maybe an engineer, right? So it's important to get that whole team together.
Yeah.
And if an engineer is pitching, you know, this new modern system, you're going to want the building operator or property manager, whoever is kind of in charge of making sure that system's operating correctly, to kind of get in the same room and talk about what the impacts are going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Anything else that I have in here? All right, that settles up all the questions I had on here.
Great questions.
I mean, I learned a lot today. Hopefully it's something I could take into, you know, my everyday dealings and even communications, you know, new clients, new potential clients. I'm looking forward to walking you through the Jersey City building and just,
looking forward to it, Tom.
you know, getting your thoughts on the actual building itself and what upgrades or, you know, capital improvement programs I could recommend to the board over there. I mean, but this has been super insightful. Let me see if I have anything else. I think that's it. Do you have anything else?
I think I'm good, Tom. Yeah, really appreciate the time with you. Really great questions. There's a lot to talk about here. So I think we covered some of the really good key points. So I appreciate the time.
Beautiful. No, I'm happy to mix it up finally a little bit on the Viza podcast, put out some content that's different from what you typically see. You know, obviously we're a property manager and real estate investment company, but with that, there's just so many different pieces that go into real estate investing and so many different parts of it. And if you're not keeping up, like, you know, you're leaving a lot of savings behind. They're just, you know, not taking full advantage of.